How do we deal with people who don't respect us? Have you ever truly sat with that question, not just brushed it aside with a tired shrug, but let it thrum inside your chest? Perhaps you're hearing my voice now because you recognize that sting. Maybe you've felt your cheeks flush in a meeting, the air crackling with dismissive laughter as a colleague slices into your idea without even looking your way. Or maybe it's subtler, the way a friend glances past you at someone more interesting when you speak, or a family member not so gently reminding you that your opinion matters a little less at the dinner table. Disrespect comes cloaked in many costumes, but its bite is always sharp and familiar. Maybe you've asked yourself, is it me? Am I being too sensitive? Should I just bite my lip and wait, hope that they'll see my value if I work a little harder, speak a little softer? It's natural to retreat inside yourself when confronted by such moments, to let those off-handed remarks, rolled eyes, or deliberate exclusions gnaw at your sense of self-worth. It doesn't matter how strong you think you are, there's always that flicker of doubt, like a small breach in a seawall, letting trickles of self-doubt spill through. Over time, those trickles become floods. But here's a radical, essential truth. Disrespect is not your fault, and it is not your burden to bear. The mistake we so often make is equating endurance with virtue. We praise ourselves for taking the high road, convincing ourselves that tolerance makes us noble. But does it really? Or does swallowing disrespect slowly poison your relationship with yourself, making you smaller, less confident, a shadow of the person you want to become? The thesis I want to share with you is clear and unapologetic. You do not and must not endure disrespect as a cost of love, companionship, or career. Disrespect may shake your confidence, but you are not obligated to accept it, and you are certainly not obliged to remain silent. My intention here isn't to offer a quick fix, nor some polished, Instagram-ready affirmation. Instead, what I want to share with you are 8 tools, inner strategies rooted in ancient stoic wisdom and shaped by my own hard-won encounters with disregard. These are not vague platitudes, but practical ways to reclaim a foothold on your own dignity when it's threatened. And yes, there will be discomfort. Growth always demands that we step out of the familiar. But the alternative, continuing to minimize yourself every time someone else undervalues you, is its own kind of suffering. Let's be clear, ignoring disrespect is not the same as becoming impervious. Avoidance is a mask, sometimes necessary, but ultimately temporary. Reclaiming your power means recognizing the moment for what it is, choosing how you will respond, and establishing the boundaries that affirm your worth. This is not about dominance or vengeance. This is about stepping forward, standing firm, and saying, not just to them but to yourself, I am not something you can brush aside. There is urgency here. Life is too short to be a spectator to your own erosion. Why give away your confidence, your serenity, your agency to the careless or the cruel? If this feels like a turning point for you, it is because some part of you already senses that change is necessary. There comes a time when we must draw a circle around what we are willing to tolerate and say, no more. It might mean difficult conversations, uncomfortable silences, or taking space you aren't used to claiming. But it also opens the door to a life lived with self-respect, a life where your spirit is not quietly siphoned away with every snide comment and undermining gesture. Before we walk through these strategies together, I want you to pause and turn your gaze inward. When was the last time someone truly disrespected you? Who was it, and how did you respond? Did you retreat, retaliate, rationalize, or were you simply left stunned into silence? What story did you tell yourself afterward? I ask not to bring up pain for its own sake, but because honest change begins with honest reckoning. Many of us have told ourselves for years that things will be different, that the next time we'll say what needs to be said. So, let me ask, are you genuinely ready to stop tolerating the intolerable? Today, as we start this journey together, the choice is yours to make. Remain in patterns of resentment and regret, or commit to the possibility that you can demand and deserve respect. I invite you to listen with your whole self, not just your intellect. What you're about to encounter is not theoretical. It's a call to action, a summons to rediscover a resilient kind of self-respect that can weather the world's indifference or malice. This is the moment to decide that your self-worth is non-negotiable, that you will meet disrespect not with silence, but with wisdom, courage, and resolve. Let's step forward, together, and see what is possible when you refuse to be small. Let's take a step into the heart of the matter, together, and hold up our lives, yes, yours and mine, next to these ideas. We've all been there, that knot in your stomach as a colleague brushes past your opinions as if they were air, or the subtle slights at a family gathering that twist under your skin hours later. You wonder, how can I respond without losing myself? This isn't just theoretical, this is the texture of everyday life. So let's peel back the layers and explore, honestly and practically, what it can mean to protect your sense of self in the face of disrespect. It starts, almost always, with boundaries. The word itself can sound clinical, but at its core, setting boundaries is an act of dignity. Think about the last time you felt the sting of a comment or an action. Did you find yourself replaying it, wishing you'd said something or stopped the conversation before it went further? Setting clear boundaries isn't about aggressiveness, it's about honesty, first with yourself and then with the world. Imagine a friend who always makes jokes at your expense. Perhaps you've laughed along, signaling that it doesn't bother you. But what if, one day, you met their eyes and simply said, "I'd appreciate it if you didn't joke about that. It doesn't sit right with me." You don't need to over-explain. The moment you articulate where your line is, something shifts, not only between you and the other person, but within yourself. There's vulnerability in that clarity. The first few times you assert a boundary, you might feel exposed. But consider this. Every time you define your limits, you're building a scaffolding for your self-respect. The transformation is real. I've witnessed it in a mentor who, after years of absorbing sarcasm at meetings, finally voiced a calm, "Let's keep our feedback professional." She reported feeling lighter, not because the behavior magically stopped, but because she had shown up for herself. If you struggle with the words, try scripts like, "That's not okay with me," or "I need to step away from this discussion." Practice these lines in quiet moments. See how they sound in your own voice. They may feel foreign at first, but with use, they become yours. Yet, boundaries are only one layer. Sometimes, establishing them invites pushback. Disrespectful people may escalate, baiting you into conflict. Why is that? Often, disrespect is a performance for power. There's an intoxicating rush in provoking a reaction, in seeing someone flustered or agitated. Here, the second strategy emerges. Avoid the power struggle. Have you noticed how easily an argument spirals when you react from wounded pride or anger? It's as if you hand the reins to the disrespectful person. The truth is, no one can drag you into a power struggle without your participation. Ancient Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius, counseled, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. When confronted, you can pause, breathe, and answer with calm detachment. A simple, "I hear your point," or "Let's move on," cuts the fuel line to the provocateur. It is not apathy, it is strength held in check. By refusing to be drawn into emotional turmoil, you undermine the very game of disrespect. This isn't simple stoicism for its own sake. It takes purposeful self-management. You might feel the urge to snap back, to defend yourself in the moment. Instead, count to 5. Observe your emotions with the curiosity of a scientist and respond with as few words as necessary. Over time, you'll notice that the more you withhold your emotional currency, the less tempted they are to spend on you. Imagine yourself as a sturdy oak in a storm, grounded, unmoved by the bluster. Of course, boundaries and emotional detachment sometimes aren't enough, especially when you're entangled in work teams, family ties, or social circles where escape isn't so straightforward. That's where the strategy of limiting exposure comes into play. It sounds simple, just spend less time with those who drain you. But what if you share an office or household? The solution isn't always physical space, but psychological distance. For example, you can sit further down the table, steer conversations toward neutral topics, or communicate by email rather than face-to-face where feasible. Picture a colleague notorious for offhand comments. Rather than dreading every encounter, you shift their role in your mind. They're now a background character, not a protagonist in your story. There is a freedom, a relief, in realizing you can control not only how you respond, but how much access others have to your attention and energy. The benefits here are profound. People who minimize exposure to chronic disrespect report feeling less anxious and more in control of their emotional states. They reserve their best selves for relationships that nourish rather than deplete. Think of it as pruning a garden. Trim away those branches that cast too much shadow, and the healthy parts can flourish in the sun. Sometimes, though, the most powerful move is to say nothing at all. There comes a point when silence becomes your greatest ally. It's counterintuitive. Doesn't silence invite more disrespect? But a well-placed pause, the choice not to dignify a jab with a reaction, drains the energy from the attacker. Imagine a relative delivering yet another pointed remark at dinner. Instead of flaring up or justifying yourself, you meet their gaze, hold your silence, and turn calmly to your plate or the person beside you. No chasing, no defending, just stillness. You'd be surprised how often the provocateur backs down, denied the satisfaction of seeing their needle land. It is in these moments, the ones where you simply refuse to play, that you discover a different kind of power, one rooted not in domination or victory, but in the refusal to be shaped by disrespect. Silence is not emptiness, but an assertion. I decide what resonates inside me. If you feel the urge to fill every space with explanation or defense, ask yourself, what would happen if I let the silence answer instead? It may be uncomfortable at first, but silence has an unexpected weight. It invites respect, where argument only invites escalation. As we weave through these 4 strategies, setting boundaries, refusing the invitation to power struggles, limiting exposure, and wielding the subtle force of silence, it's important to remember, these aren't just tips from a book or a lecture. They're the hard-won practices of ordinary people learning, sometimes painfully, to claim their worth. And you are entitled to do the same. What would your days look like if you lived these ideas, not perfectly, but persistently, even amid setbacks? Would your view of yourself and of others change? These questions don't have neat answers, but exploring them shapes the moral texture of your life. But let's go further. Let's remember that boundary setting isn't a box we tick once and then forget. It's not some shield you forge, hang around your neck, and expect to work definitively forever. Instead, think of it more like tending the fence around a precious garden. Storms may bend some rails, wild growth might obscure where the gate once stood, and sometimes, you may forget to close it behind you. Boundaries require care, commitment, and above all, repetition. Perhaps you've experienced that familiar sinking feeling when saying no doesn't stick. Maybe someone pushes back, scoffs at your limits, or accuses you of being unfair. But here's a liberating truth. Boundary setting is a sustained conversation, not a single declaration. Assertiveness, the clear, firm restatement of your needs, is the thread that pulls your fence upright each time it sags. It is not aggression. You're not out to conquer or control anyone. Assertiveness is the gentle but resolute voice saying, "I matter just as much as you." Yet, all too often, society mislabels this as coldness, selfishness, or even rudeness, especially when these boundaries come from those whose voices have historically been expected to accommodate. Have you ever flinched at the idea of setting a hard boundary because you imagined someone would label you difficult? You're not alone. Socialization, especially for those told from youth to keep the peace, prizes politeness above self-respect. But politeness shouldn't cost you your peace, should it? Next time you feel the urge to back down, ask yourself, who benefits when I stay silent? And what does it cost me to be silent? But what about those times when someone's disregard cuts deeper? When disrespect arrives, a dismissive remark, a rolled eye, a deliberate exclusion, it's almost instinctual to internalize it, to feel that maybe you failed somehow. Here's the paradox. Most disrespect isn't actually about you. It's projection, the expression of another's unresolved insecurities, fears, or pain. Psychologists remind us that people often throw their inner turmoil outward, using others as screens for their own shadow. Can you picture a moment when someone's words stung, only to realize later it was their own struggle at play? Perhaps a friend lashing out as their own life unraveled, or a manager undermining you to mask their own sense of inadequacy. Learning not to take things personally is both armor and healing balm. Imagine reclaiming the energy you've spent dissecting every slight and redirecting it toward what truly matters, your growth, your interests, your joy. There's an immense freedom in realizing that not every negative interaction requires your emotional investment. Now, let's talk about the art and courage of walking away. From the youngest age, we're told to persevere, to be resilient, to never give up. But sometimes, the bravest act, the most life-affirming decision, is retreat, not pursuit. Think about the power in leaving a conversation that has turned poisonous, or ending a relationship that has long crossed the line from nurturing to toxic. Picture the courage it takes to resign from a job where you're consistently disrespected, regardless of the stability you're leaving behind. Walking away isn't cowardice, it's a declaration. My sanity, my values, my sense of self matter more than this situation. Yet, so many internal stories rise up in defiance: guilt, fear of judgment, the persistent illusion that endurance equals virtue. And the world often colludes with those stories, framing departure as failure. But is it failure to refuse to suffer needlessly? Might it, in fact, be the purest self-respect to turn your back on what harms you and walk toward what heals? All this is made easier, or infinitely harder, by the company we keep. There's an old maxim: you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. This is not merely cliché, but observable fact. Are you surrounded by those who dim your light or who encourage your growth? Build, cultivate, seek out those who celebrate your boundaries, who remind you, especially when you forget, of what you deserve. Not everyone is born into supportive circles. You may need to seek them out purposefully, finding spaces, online or off, in friendship or community, where respect is the norm, not the exception. Practical steps can start small. Notice who leaves you feeling lighter, not heavier. Invest in those connections. If none exist yet, have the courage to reach out to a group, a mentor, even a stranger with whom you share an affinity. Supportive networks are not luxury. They are infrastructure for a resilient, joyful life. Still, these strategies raise real questions. Is withdrawal or silence ever mere avoidance, a denial of growth instead of a stance of power? Absolutely. A retreat born of fear can be a trap, just as one carried out in alignment with your values is liberation. How do you tell the difference? Ask yourself, am I stepping back to preserve my well-being, or am I hiding from discomfort that contains lessons? Am I exiting to heal or simply to escape? Standing up for yourself, too, can sometimes escalate tensions. There's risk, sometimes even danger, in calling out disrespect. That's its own hard terrain, requiring discernment, courage, and sometimes safe, strategic silence instead. Where's the line between forgiving a slip and enabling a pattern of harm? Between extending tolerance and condoning what erodes your spirit? These are messy, lived questions with no universal answers, only the ongoing work of self-knowing, reflection, and sometimes bravery. The truth is, every act, speaking up or letting go, writes itself into your self-image, carving out who you believe you are and who you might yet become. The choices you make about who you allow into your mind and into your days ultimately shape not just your immediate happiness, but the very story you tell yourself about your worth and your place in the world. Isn't it astonishing and a little humbling to realize that the company you keep and the standards you hold cast a long shadow over the landscape of your own satisfaction? What kind of life, what kind of self are you curating by the doors you close and the doors you bravely, continually leave open? So let's take a step back and consider the ground we've covered together. When you faced those moments of blatant or subtle disrespect, what did they reveal to you? Not just about yourself, but about the person aiming those barbed words, that dismissive glance, that thoughtless slight. Our journey began with the notion that disrespect, more than we realize, tells us far more about the one who delivers it than the one who receives it. Isn't it curious, then, to realize that the sting you feel is often merely a reflection of someone else's tangled insecurities or unchecked arrogance? Some part of us already knows this, yet when we're in the thick of it, does that knowledge truly shield us? Consider the last time someone scoffed at your ideas in a meeting or brushed past you as if your presence wasn't worth acknowledging. Was it your failing? Or was it an echo of their own need to dominate, to feel less small, perhaps? Imagine what would shift if, in that hurtful instant, you paused and remembered, this is not a mirror of my worth, but a window into theirs. It doesn't make the experience pleasant, but it loosens the grip of humiliation, doesn't it? But there's more. Because even if we see disrespect for what it is, a symptom of another's struggles, what do we do with it? Too often we let such moments dictate our boundaries. We shrink or bristle, wondering if we're at fault for demanding dignity. Yet, let me offer this. What if defining those boundaries was the truest act of self-respect? What if, instead of allowing others to redraw our lines with every careless word, we quietly, deliberately reclaimed them? Picture yourself as the architect of your own life, tracing the perimeter of your emotional and intellectual home and deciding who may enter and under what terms. It isn't easy. Instinct urges us to seek validation, to lean in and win over the difficult, the cold, the disrespectful. But what is the cost to ourselves when we do? Real strength, I suggest, is found not in relentless engagement, but in selective engagement, in choosing whom to invest energy in, and, just as importantly, whom to keep at arm's length. It's not about arrogance or dismissal, but about honoring the fragile garden of your own well-being. If you find yourself doubting this, think of someone you esteem. Do they chase every critic, or do they conserve their focus for those who matter? Of course, the world doesn't always let us withdraw. Sometimes difficult people are woven into the fabric of our lives, colleagues, family members, even people we thought were friends. In these cases, emotional distance can become your sanctuary. What does that look like? It's a subtle daily practice, not expecting validation from sources unlikely to offer it, not internalizing poisonous remarks, surrounding yourself with those who restore rather than drain you. It's the discipline of walking away when necessary, physically, emotionally, or conversationally, and the wisdom of seeking supportive companies that help you repair, recover, and grow. Suppose you're in a hostile work environment. Maybe the jokes at your expense never seem to end, or your contributions vanish into silence. Instead of absorbing each slight as if it were truth, reach out to someone who sees you, perhaps a trusted friend, a mentor, a community group. Let their voices be the counterweight to the noise. With time, you'll come to see that a supportive community isn't just consolation, but a catalyst. It emboldens you to assert boundaries you once thought impossible. But all these strategies, whether boundaries, distance, or supportive communities, are more than shields. They are tools for self-empowerment. Used thoughtfully, they don't just defend against disrespect. They give you power over the meaning you assign to each encounter. What choices open up for you when you stop letting disrespect define you and start defining yourself? And here's the crux. You, more than anyone, set the standard for how you're treated. People take their cues from your actions, your demeanor, your clear yes, and your unwavering no. If self-respect falters, the world may not rush in to remind you of your worth. That responsibility, daunting yet liberating, is yours. Isn't it extraordinary to think that by tending to your own standards, you give others permission to do the same? Let me ask you, imagine a community, your family, your workplace, your circle of friends, where everyone truly held themselves and each other to a standard of respect, where boundaries weren't just tolerated but celebrated, where support and distance were both honored tools in the kit of living well with others. What kind of world might unfold if we all demanded and modeled the respect we know we deserve? Would we not all grow taller in each other's presence instead of shrinking or bracing for hurt? As you reflect on these possibilities, let this be more than a moment of insight. Let it be the beginning of a new practice. Carry these lessons forward, draw your boundaries confidently, seek out those who support your flourishing, and offer to others a respect that comes from deep reserves of your own self-regard. Share these ideas with someone who needs them. Be a witness to the change a single act of respect can ignite. And above all, turn this question over in your mind. What part can you play each day in nurturing a world where respect is the default and not the exception? With each step you take, each line you draw, you are carrying the torch of self-respect, not just for yourself, but for all who walk beside you. The conversation continues, not just here, but in every choice you make. The standard you set may be the one someone else learns to aspire to. So, as you leave this reflection, I invite you, do not merely ponder, but live these truths, and watch what unfolds.